Hey everybody, welcome to Local Business Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Case, and I'm on a mission to help you. Every week, we're going to be talking to local business owners and experts to get their best tips, tricks, and hacks to grow your business. This show is designed to teach you, inspire you, and motivate you to take massive action and start to build your future-proof business. Whether you're just starting off or you're taking your existing business to the next level, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Hey, local business hackers. I'm your host, Carl Case, Director of Global Business Development, joined today by CEO of Axia Public Relations, Jason Mudd. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Carl, it's good to see you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really glad to be here today.
We are too. Jason, I don't think that most people become not only North America's top PR leader, but the Forbes named top agency in America. How did you guys get to this point, and tell me your story?
Well, it's funny. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary. So you're making me think of like what Warren Buffett says, right? It takes 20 years to build a reputation and a few minutes to ruin it. And so we're just doing our best not to ruin it after working hard for 20 years, Carl.
Well, congratulations to you. And I mean, you have quite the book of business that you've worked with, from companies that I think everyone globally has heard: American Airlines, Budweiser, Hilton, Pizza Hut, you name it. Talk to me about this journey that ultimately got you, Jason, to get to this point and found Axia.
Yeah. So, it's funny. My son is about to turn 18. He's looking at colleges and all that, and trying to figure out a major is probably really where he is. And so he was asking me all these questions about my journey, and it was fun to recount that for him. So I'll just tell you what I told him, which is from the time I was in like first or second grade, I had a passion for writing. I was interested in news. I was reading newspapers. I started a newsletter, if you will, for our street. I started writing children's books and just things like that. So I always had this itch to be in writing. So I was attracted to journalism at an early age. I left Fernandina Beach High School to go to the University of Missouri. I'd never been to the Midwest before. I literally had to look on a map to see where exactly in the Midwest Missouri was. But I was working at the time as a high school student, both at the local weekly newspaper, and I was contributing to the daily newspaper in Jacksonville, Florida, as a high school student. And I wasn't great in school. I didn't make great grades. So I told my son, a lot of people told me I shouldn't go to college, but I had this career path that I was on, and I had done enough things in my early years that I was able to, I don't say bend the rules, but get some exceptions to be able to get into the University of Missouri School of Journalism. And so people just told me, hey, if you're serious about journalism, you need to go study it in Missouri. And so I did it. And I went there, didn't know a soul, didn't really know anything. I needed a job to pay my way through school and work my way through school. And that's what I did for 4 years. And the happy accident is during those years, I was able to get positions that paid, that were like internships or even full-time jobs related to the industry or to the work I wanted to do. So my first job out of college was managing other people. Even though I was younger than them, I had more experience than they did. So literally my first job out of college, I was a department head for a marketing team. I did it out of necessity. I needed work, and I didn't want to work in the food court or the bookstore or a restaurant, those traditional jobs. I was like, how can I just go do what I want to do more of? And partially because I had that experience, so I had that confidence to go out and do it. And so that gave me a competitive edge. And I would say, as I tell my kids, a college degree gives you a competitive edge also. So while there's a lot of talk, is college worth it? And I understand those sentiments. The truth is that a college degree differentiates you and probably puts you on a faster track than, unfortunately, if you had 4 years of working experience instead. Now, as an employer, I'm kind of more interested in those people that have the 4 years of work experience, right? But at the end of the day, traditionally speaking, college does pay off in that way. So while I was at the University of Missouri, I had mentioned I had jobs. I had to work. And one of the jobs I had was working in the School of Journalism in their recruitment, alumni relations, and career center. It was all in one small office. And they put me to work on a work study program to help me pay my way through school. That was part of the deal. I said, hey, if I come there, I'm going to need a job so I can make up for the gap of financial assistance. So I qualified for work study. They put me to work. And next thing you know, I'm doing PR for them. And the head of the advisory department, or the career consultant there, he became a friend, and he just said, hey, you're really good at this PR thing. Are you sure this isn't what you want to do? And I'm like, no, I'm here for journalism. But ultimately, I fell in love with this idea, Carl, of reporting the news instead of reporting other people's news and other people's agenda, I was asked to help a nonprofit kind of on the side, give them some advice on how to get some more attention for their organization. And I fell in love with the ability to help them craft their own agenda and tell their own message and be able to advocate for it. And good journalism, you're not advocating, right? You're neutral, you're not biased. It's very rare to find in newsrooms today. I think we all agree to that. But at the end of the day, I was trying to have high level of integrity in the newsroom and not take opinions and not take positions. But I just fell in love with what this nonprofit was doing. And so I just said to myself, you know what? Maybe I do want to work in public relations. Maybe I do want to help organizations advance their story and advance their agenda, as opposed to showing up to meetings to report other people's agendas and other organizations' agendas.
Well, obviously that's unique that you were able to really embed yourself in an internship that got you to where you are today. Jason, I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on how you've climbed this ladder, what it looks now in retrospect as fast, but over time, it's got some slippery steps on it. To give some context to that, your portfolio is incredibly impressive, from working with publicly traded organizations to some of the biggest brands that people interact with daily. What has been that process to get to that point, and some tips and tricks maybe surrounding around that?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So early in my career, I was starting the agency. I was hungry. The day that I was starting to tell people we started the agency, I was selling my home, moving into a new house. And then we discovered that morning that we're expecting our first child. And so you've got basically 9 months to start a business. You're starting from ground zero, literally no clients or anything. I had 9 months to get it figured out because we were already committed to one of us staying home with our kids, and my wife wanted that to really be her. I think that would have been my dream job, but at the end of the day, I'm very ambitious and was eager to continue to grow in my career. So point is that I had a fire underneath me and a 9-month deadline to kind of make it work. So that didn't hurt. And I think at the end of the day, what we were really good at is getting clients results and focusing on treating our relationships with our clients as if it was our own money, our own investment. What would we want and what would we recommend to them? Previously I had been with, in my role, corporate side, I was hiring, coordinating, and even sometimes firing other agencies. And so I knew there was an opportunity for a better agency experience for both the clients and the employees. I worked at an agency for a very short period of time and just felt like everybody was a little bit overworked and underpaid. And I don't mean any disrespect to those individuals. It's just the way I observed when I was there. And so at the end of the day, I just thought there's got to be a better model. And then as I became a client, I was underwhelmed by the overpromise, underdeliver, the sizzle and no meat that I was experiencing from agencies. So one thing I think was really good for me is having very little agency experience and having more client experience, really feeling like there's got to be a better way. And so just really emphasizing that in every stage of our business is, okay, how can we create a better client experience? How can we provide more value to our clients? And I think that's been a differentiator because, the agency world has a little bit of a reputation of being elitist in some way. And of course, there are great agencies who aren't like that. And there's other agencies who are just really high in the sky and think highly of themselves. And I think that ACK is important. And one of our core values is improve. And so we seek to get 1% better every day. And that constant improvement and constantly challenging and pushing yourself to be better has paid off well for us.
That's awesome. Jason, obviously, congrats again. When you say reputation and things like that, when you talk about the brands in your portfolio, would you really say that was expanded on word of mouth, or that you had a trick of standing at the door for 2 weeks to make that introduction with the person that you knew you had to do? Give me a little juice as to what got you to this portfolio.
Yeah. So early on, I was, I mentioned earlier, and I guess I never really got around to expressing it, but I was hinting to I was ambitious and very eager. And, at the end of the day, the one lesson I really learned in the Great Recession was that our smaller clients dropped out really quickly, right? 40% of our clients disappeared in the month of September 2007. And I'll never forget it because I'd never seen that before, never dealt with that before. But when 40% of your business evaporates within 30 days, something's clearly wrong. And And so that was very early before people were talking about a recession. People were like, I don't know what you're talking about. The economy's fine. And I'm like, well, our clients are not saying that. But what the trend I noticed later was those were all the startups. Those were all the small businesses, right? The bigger, more enterprise sized companies, they stayed with us. And they said, if anything, now is when we need you the most. And, that wasn't lost on me. So I really thought about that quite a bit and said, there's something to this. And so at the end of the day, bigger companies have bigger pockets. So they're certainly more attractive. You don't necessarily get to do your best work for them. You don't necessarily get to work as quickly with them, meaning that they're sometimes slower to move and adopt and approve and proceed with things. But that's just par for the course. So yeah, I think early in my career, I was more ambitious about business development and outreach and even doing cold calling type activities and things like that. But at the end of the day, what has worked best for us is demonstrating great work, producing case studies, kind of promoting the work that we're doing. And certainly from day one, search engine optimization has been very helpful to us. So I was doing search engine optimization around 1998 before I think anybody was calling it that. We just said, hey, cool, look, we can help you get ranked higher on Yahoo. And back then, Yahoo was the big deal. And it was just one of those things like, oh, okay. So, I mean, honestly, I would say, it was an element of what we now would call keyword stuffing, right? Just putting a lot of keywords on a page and getting it to rank high. And so it wasn't hard. Like literally you could go from, so somebody introduced me to search engine optimization. They had a little e-commerce store that we built for them. They're like, hey, look, I got us ranked on Yahoo, the first listing. And I'm like, if you can do that, I'm pretty sure I could do that. And so I spent the weekend, I basically I created a fake website that was exact products that this person had and everything else. And so Monday morning I go, hey, do a search on Yahoo for, your products again. And he did it. And he goes, who's this other company? And I'm like, it's a company I created over the weekend. And he was like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, like I couldn't believe you figured out how to do it. So I wanted to learn how to do it myself. And so at the time I was running a web design company. So we started rolling out search engine optimization services. Again, we weren't smart enough to call it that. We just said, hey, we can get you ranked high on Yahoo. And that was the wild west of the internet back then. And so that was a lot of fun. And so when I started my own agency a few years later, we really invested in search engine optimization. So the two ways we get the most leads are search engine optimization, number one, and inbound marketing, as we call it today. And then secondly is just referrals from current clients and people who respect our work.
I love that. Well, Jason, it's super exciting to be with somebody like you that has that team behind them and has been doing this since 1998.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. So I want to transition a little bit into what we are at Local Business Hacks. I can imagine that in the last umpteen years of you doing this, that you've gotten some ultimate tips and tricks that are in your toolbook that, myself and our listeners included would love to hear. So if you don't mind sharing some of those, and what is the story that drove that tip? The floor is yours.
Yeah, happy to do that. I've got so many, right? So I'm an active reader. I'm always trying to learn more. I'm always going to conferences and workshops and professional development. Again, we talked about improvement being one of our core values. And so professional development is part of that. So not only are we asking our team to get 1% better every day, but we're investing in them and giving them professional development dollars as well. Part of the gig is, hey, if we send you to a conference, you go to a workshop, you attend a webinar, we want you to report back to the team what you learned and some takeaways that everybody could benefit from. So that's really important to us too. But one of the best things that I do is every morning I get up and I take a 3x5 card that I had printed up. And you can buy these from a group called 3x5 Life, as I recall. But mine are a little bit different than theirs. But ultimately, there's a column that says your schedule for the day. There's another column that says your to-dos for the day. And then on one side, you've got a place to take notes. And then on another side, I've got kind of my gratitude and my successes. So every morning I start my morning off. I've got one of those lamps that shines. I forget the science, but it shines light onto you to kind of help wake you up a little bit, and it emulates like natural sunlight. And so I just spend my morning there kind of journaling on this 3x5 card of, okay, what am I grateful for today? Kind of 3 things. And that is amazing to me. And that's something I would have never believed in on my own because I'm so cynical. But that really starts off the day in a positive foot. And then I write down kind of my schedule for the day and then my must-dos for the day. And then usually that gets me energized. I feel the energy of, okay, I've got to do these things. I'm excited to do these things. And then I try to get my first thing done before I really start opening up the laptop. And so that's a little cliche because some of the things I'm doing is on a laptop, but I'm certainly not checking my messages, my email, my social media. I'm single focused on that one task for the day. And then, of course, I do the thing that military guy says, make your bed. So I make my bed, I do all that stuff. And the next thing you know, I've got 2 or 3 to-dos done for the day. I've got an attitude of gratitude to start the day off. And as we were talking about before we hit record, then I do a little yoga. And 2 or 3 years ago, I would say Jason Mudd does not do yoga. Jason Mudd does not do gratitude journaling. But as you get older, you start to appreciate life a little bit differently. And I'll be 47 next month. And I'm starting to think about my second half. And my second half is going to involve a lot more stretching and yoga and taking care of myself and a little less fast food and fast-paced kind of work. The other things I would just say is I'm really proud of our agency's core values. We went about the first 10 years of our agency not really having core values. Again, something that I would tell you is a little bit of just showmanship and not really important, but I've done a 180-degree turn on that. I think that's very important. So our core values are number 1, integrity, number 2, ideas, number 3, relationships, number 4, results, and number 5, improve. And so by happy accident, those 5 core values, in my mind, would be exactly what a client would want from a PR agency, right? So if we do all 5 of those things, then we're going to have clients for life, and there'd be no reason they would ever want to leave us. If we have high integrity in our PR, we have great ideas, we have great relationships, we have great results, and we're always improving. That seems like the type of agency I want to work for, the type of agency I want working for me, and the type of agency I want to do business with. But if you look at those 5 things, they're very motivating. They're very specific about the type of work that we want to be doing. And if someone doesn't feel the same attraction to those core values, then it's best that they don't work with us. What are some of the recommendations I have? Is number 1, integrity. You have one brand, one reputation, one chance to do it right. And, over the years, there's been situations where I wasn't at my best, or I might have made a short-term decision that did not have the impact long-term that I would hope for. So, I adjusted my thinking to be very focused on the long-term. And, questions to ask yourself are, would my grandmother be proud of me for making this decision, right? Or is this the decision I want to tell my grandkids about? Or is this something I'll be proud of doing 5 years down the road? And not that I was maliciously taking shortcuts, right? But it was more of, maybe being a little too assertive or aggressive, or maybe even a little too critical at the wrong times. And so I've taken on more of an attitude of grace and patience and coaching and developing, as opposed to when I first started out, I was very, I would say, just rigid. And part of that was because I had a boss who was very rigid and that kind of thing. And I was just emulating what I knew and what I saw. And, for every 2 great bosses, I had 2 that weren't so great. And I learned both the good things from certain bosses and the bad things from certain bosses. And I'm always reflecting also at the end of my day, Carl, what did I do well today? What could I have done better? And things like that. And that sometimes gets into my, journaling as well, just to acknowledge kind of, hey, I was probably a little short with this person. I probably should have clarified a little bit more with this person. I should have been more patient in my communications with this person. So I'm a big believer in kind of reflecting.
That's awesome. I'm a big Tony Robbins guy. I start every day. My attitude is definitely gratitude with his priming exercise. So it's nice. I love how you do it. I'm definitely going to give it a try. And it's amazing when you set your day up for success right out the gate, what you're capable of. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, if we have the time and you have the interest, we could talk specifically about some of the tips about the PR as well, which I really just talked more generally to appeal to as broad of an audience as I can, but I'm happy to share some PR tips if there's time.
Please.
Okay. So I do some keynote speaking, and one of my keynotes is public relations is the best way to build a strong brand and a great reputation. But the problem is that most people don't know what PR is. And when they do PR, they often do it wrong. And so I talked through examples of kind of best practices of PR and worst practices of PR. And I've had several kind of powerful business people that I've met on flights or at conferences or whatever. And especially when I'm talking to a CEO who is looking to hire a PR agency, they'll say to me, hey, I don't know what PR is, but I know we need it. And I know when companies have it, right? And that happens all the time. And Carl, I see you acknowledging that. So, it is a frequent thing that does happen. And so how I describe it is, the Public Relations Society of America has their own definition, which is basically it's about building mutually beneficial relationships. To me, I look at it as problem solving and communicating well about it. And that's a unique definition. Part of that is my personality is I'm by nature a natural problem solver. And I'm also very interested in communications. But to me, I think the problem is that most people set out doing PR with a sales mentality, a salesmanship mentality. We're the best, we're this, we're that. We have this many employees, this many locations, this many customers, this many products and services. And they're just dumping all this information, belching all this information onto you instead of starting out and saying, well, Carl, tell me more about you and your company and what are some of your challenges, right? And then diagnosing through a series of 12 questions to kind of better understand who you are, what you do, and why you want PR, but really what PR opportunities truly exist, because we all want PR. If you own a lawn service, for example, and you're doing business in 1 or 2 cities, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense for you to try to be in the Wall Street Journal unless you're just looking for an ego play, right? But it would make a lot of sense for you to be in the community newspapers, the community websites, the community social media, where people can actually do business with you. And one example I tell people all the time is we have had the pleasure, as you mentioned, Carl, working with some pretty big, prominent brands, some publicly traded companies. And don't get me wrong, they're excited to be in the Wall Street Journal and CNBC and all these types of things. But where we get the most feedback is always when they're in their hometown newspaper or the hometown blog or something like that. And it's so simple to explain. It's because most people are not consuming the major national media, even though that's the largest outlets, right, that are getting the most viewers. When you go to the grocery store or the country club or the golf course or Rotary Club or the chamber, 90% of those people are not reading or consuming that media. But they are going to read or at least hear about what's in the local weekly, daily newspaper or television news in their market. So what happens is these powerful people love being in the powerful media, but when they're in their hometown community paper, everybody knows it, recognizes it, and sees it. So I was quoted earlier this year in the New York Times. I was quoted earlier this year in PR Week, the industry trade magazine for the public relations industry. A few people might have said something, right? But most recently, when I was named the top PR leader in North America, the local community paper where I live did a nice story about it, put my photo in it and everything. And I mean, I'm getting text messages and DMs and people, seeing me out and about and pulling me aside and saying something to me. People that surprise me, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't even think you would have noticed or cared. So my point is that that's been the experience from our clients as well. So we always budget a little bit of our PR funds to do local PR, even when they've asked us not to do local PR, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's incredible, but that just with like any marketing, there's not one fit for every organization. Mm-hmm. And there's so many different outlets now to portray your story and get to the right audience that it helps when working with somebody like you.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all about, Carl, making it about your audience and not about your organization, having an attitude of helping them and guiding them and solving their challenges. Because if you can help other people get to the destination they want to be at, then they're going to reward you either by referrals or by hiring you or using your service. But it's about building trust. People like to buy, they don't like to be sold. And people like to buy from people they know, like, and trust. And the way they get to know you, like you, and trust you is if you ask them questions and you get to know them and you're offering to help them. And I think that authenticity can come through, especially when people's guard is down. There's been times like during the Great Recession where I just said to some companies, I'm like, hey, we've got some downtime right now. We're looking to help other companies just to keep us busy and occupied and not stressed out about what's going on in the world and flexing and exercising our capabilities. And some people were on guard and suspicious. Well, why are you trying to help? But at the end of the day, it was out of genuine effort. And I think the right people sensed that we were trying to help and took advantage of that. And other people just weren't open to being helped in that regard. But I looked at it as a training opportunity of saying, hey, let's get somebody who's maybe not so experienced in social media. Let's get them helping another company who's even less experienced with social media. And then we can broaden the horizons of both organizations. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's all about helping and serving your audience and being in good service to your audience, not trying to sell to them or promote to them. and eventually they'll warm up to you. It might take a little bit longer, but you probably will have a longer term relationship with those people too.
Of course, it reminds me of the clients that we turn down all the time because they're just not the right fit. And then when they come back a couple months later and it's like, hey, I'm ready. It's so exciting to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jason, so before we end, I want to give you an opportunity because you have quite a cool podcast yourself. On Top of PR, top 5 most listened to or top 5% most popular podcast. Talk to our listeners on how do they connect with you? How do they connect with the podcast?
Yeah, thank you. I wish we were the top 5 podcast. That would be amazing, right? Because I would just do the podcast full time. I really enjoy it. But I'm actually doing this interview from our videocast studio right here. It is on Top of PR, on topofpr.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on all the normal Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts kind of platforms. But yeah, it's one of the top 100 podcasts in America for marketing, according to Apple. I'd love for it to be top 5. So maybe we should do an episode on how to get there. But yeah, we would love for people to tune in and check that out. And again, our attitude there is helping. Every 5th episode, I do a solo cast where it's just me giving advice and recommendations. And then the 4 other episodes, we bring in an expert guest, whether that's an author or a consultant, or maybe even a software company or something like that. But we're talking about how to get media coverage, how to speak, how to win awards for your company, how to protect your reputation, how to do social media better, how to do inbound marketing and content marketing, search engine optimization, blogging, etc. So we're always trying to kind of pay it forward. And we also take time to think about our industry and sometimes speak critically about the industry as well. We did a recording talking about this interesting challenge in the PR industry that it's a female dominated industry, but men are dominating leadership roles. And young men or college students males aren't really studying PR and aren't really entering the profession. And so how do you find that right balance of making sure that you're still getting men into the profession, but at the same time that they're not occupying all the top seats? And where are things going wrong and how do we handle that? So we interviewed an author who wrote a book about that, and she was very insightful and very helpful. And I learned a lot from the episode. And it's interesting. It's like you need to mentor young men to keep them in the profession, but you need to mentor young women so that they're able to move into those right positions. And you just have to watch out for how society and the industry and business is thinking about and referring and making preconceived bias in those roles. So that was a very good interview.
That's awesome. Jason, thank you from myself and our listeners all over the globe. What's the best way to connect with you and Axia?
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Probably the best way to connect with us is to follow us on social media. Most of our handles are Axia PR. And certainly I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, but there is one caveat. You have to give me a custom invitation saying, that you heard me on the podcast, because otherwise I'm not going to know who you are or anything like that, and get a lot of unsolicited requests and people trying to sell something to us, of course, as we all are. The other thing I would do is if you go to axiapr.com/podcast, you'll be able to get a special offer from our organization also.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you again. And I look forward to catching up with you and following your journey.
Carl, it's been a pleasure. I was glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and continue to do the great work that you and your organization are doing too.
Thanks, Jason. See you later.
Be well.
Thank you so much. That's it for this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure to head over to our site, local-business-hacks.com, to check out the show notes and send me questions or ideas for future episodes. If you want to grow your business, just like the people you've heard from here, follow Local Business Hacks Podcast and tune in for new tips, tricks, and tactics. Until next time, thanks for listening and keep hacking.